We have a big topic to discuss in only 50 minutes, so I will jump straight to it. You will have a chance to interact with the panelists. Towards the end of the session, there will be a Q&A session. But I think we've put together a great selection of people to discuss this timely topic on food security and geopolitics. Because amid war, climate shocks, and growing political rivalry, food security is no longer just an agricultural or development issue. It is really a question of power, stability, and strategic risk. Global food supply chains are under strain from every direction. Conflict disrupting trade routes, extreme weather damaging harvests, political tension reshaping markets. Import-dependent countries face sudden price rise and shortages, whereas major exporters understand that access to food can translate into influence. And to grasp the full scale, we need to widen our lens. Food systems are not only affected by conflict, they can shape it. Food has long been weaponized through trade blockades, attacks on infrastructure, and manipulation of markets. And in fragile agricultural dependent economies, armed groups often embed themselves within food production and distribution. Because control over land, inputs, and markets becomes a source of revenue and power. And the threat landscape is also evolving. Modern agriculture now depends heavily on digital systems, logistic platforms, automated storage, data-driven supply chain, to name a few. And while these systems increase efficiencies, they also create new vulnerabilities. For example, a cyber attack that disrupts storage or transport could halt deliveries to cities, spoil reserves, and interrupt supplies to critical institutions. And in interconnected worlds, these disruptions do not remain local. And this is the sense of hybrid threats, actions that blur the line between war and peace. Food systems are attractive targets precisely because they are essential. Where they are disrupted, inflation rises, public trust erodes, and social tensions intensify. Yet those responsible for protecting food systems, be it farmers, businesses, cybersecurity specialists, public health authorities, or defense planners, they rarely cooperate in a coordinated manner across sectors. And what defines this moment is the speed and scale at which disruption spreads. A shock in one region can ripple across continents, affecting prices, politics, and stability far from its origins. All of this compels us to rethink resilience. Resilience is not simply about producing more food. It is about ensuring that societies absorb shocks without sliding into crisis. And this means that food security must be treated as a core pillar of national and collective security, and not merely as a secondary development or humanitarian concern. That means closer cooperation across sectors, smarter investment in sustainable production, and clearer coordination between governments, industry, and security institutions to anticipate risks before they escalate. In the 21st century, food is more than simply a basic need. It's a strategic asset, it's infrastructure, it's leverage. So the question is not whether food systems shape geopolitics and conflicts, they already do. The real question is whether we will act with enough foresight and coordination to prevent food crisis and the weaponization of food, rather than simply responding once stability has taken hold. And with this, to start off the conversation, I want to go straight to you, Premier Mo. In a world where food supply chains are increasingly exposed to geopolitical coercion, climate shocks, and hybrid disruption, what concrete mix of domestic production capacity, diversified trade alliances, and strategic reserves are necessary to ensure resilience, but without triggering protectionism or creating new strategic dependencies?
Well, thank you very much, Caroline, and thank you everyone for joining us here today. Just before I make a few comments, and I'll speak to those three topics, I just want to make note of a former Prime Minister of the country where I live, Canada. Former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Stephen Harper, has joined us here today and will be presenting later this week at Roicina as well. So thank you, Prime Minister, for joining us. You might ask why a province, one of 10 provinces in Canada, would be presenting at a Racina conference on food security. And there's a couple of reasons as to why that might be. The number of people that live in our province is not one of them. We have about 1.25 million people, which is a suburb in India and in many countries around the world. However, we do have about 40% of Canada's arable agricultural farmland, quite productive farmland, but that's really only part of the story. The rest of the story is what Saskatchewan people do and how they engage around the world in being a part of the supply chain, the food security supply chain for, at present, over 160 countries. And it isn't just limited to agri-food production. There's some other aspects to that I'll come to in a minute. And so domestic production is one thing I'll speak to. The second would be engagement with those countries and those markets around the world and becoming embedded as a portion of their food security supply chain, which I think is critical to form those relationships. And that might explain a little bit more as to why a premier of a provincial province in Canada, but largely an agrarian province or an interest in food security and agriculture, might be in a country of 1.4 billion people. That certainly is looking for nutritional security over the next number of years. And then last but not least, and I won't speak very much to this, and I'll speak to it first, but is domestic storage and inventories that we used to see in years gone by. And there's a number of challenges with that. Some are geopolitical challenges. Some are the development and organization of your sector, your country, in being able to organize stocks that traditionally in decades gone by that we have seen in many countries. And then there's climactic challenges as well. None of those are really a problem in Canada for storage because we're frozen quite hard half of the year. There's no pests, there's no threats. It's quite simple for us. But that isn't the case, and we understand that isn't the case in other areas of the world. And so I'll back up in reverse to the market diversification and the effort that Saskatchewan makes alongside our embassies, our high commissions, our nation of Canada. And Prime Minister Harper has been a great advocate and a great help to our province and to all Canadians in his time in office and even after, with respect to advising us on how to engage. And each country's not unique, but each country is different in how you engage and how you really have those conversations about, listen, we're a province that has significant not only agri-food products, but we have some other innovation and products that can help with your own domestic food security and your own domestic food production. And we want to be part of all of that, not just making a sale and delivering some agri-food products this year. We want to be a part of the entirety of your food security program, your nutritional security program. And so we engage on that basis. And we have provincial offices located in a number of different countries, our largest trading partners around the world. And we engage very openly with respect to, we're not here just to make a sale of peas and canola and those type of products. We're here actually to engage on the innovation that we have in sustainable agricultural and food production in Saskatchewan, how we're reducing the carbon content of the crops that we're producing. We're doing enhancements in the space of moisture conservation, soil preservation, and it's working for us as we see our soil actually improving over time. We see our carbon content of the crops that we're producing decreasing over time, which is ultimately making for much more sustainable production. I would say by most recent measurements in large-scale agricultural production, some of the most sustainable food that you can find on Earth. But we also then engage on some of the genetics, some of the biotechnology, some of the agronomics, the balanced fertility that we have learned over the years to utilize in our food production systems in Saskatchewan, and share that with other areas of the world where it works. And this is where each country is somewhat different with respect to what is working and what can work in Saskatchewan, Canada, but what may work and overlay that innovation in another area of the world. And then last but not least in that space is we're blessed, in addition to 25 million hectares of highly productive ag land and some wonderful innovative people that that utilize that ag land and sustainable production. We have some natural resources that our province is blessed with that we've developed, and we produce about 35% of global potash supply. And we make that available to 50 or 60 countries around the world as well. And again, that's part of what we bring in that conversation as a Canadian province in enhancing food security, nutritional security, not just making a sale of agri-food products. Then where I started on the production side, and I maybe touched this and blended them together, but we're always looking for ways to push the edges with companies like Corteva and others around the world on ensuring that we are not only maximizing our production, but maximizing the answer to the question on how are you producing the products that you're making available around the world. And we have done studies with respect to a number of environmental metrics, and we're quite proud of the answer to that question: how are we producing the products that we are? But we're also willing to share that innovation, which I think is much different than maybe many other jurisdictions that are looking at the opportunity of being a supplier of whether it be food or energy security, which is largely what the needs that we have wherever we live, using those blessings, if you will, as a tool to achieve some other gains. And that isn't the way that we approach this in Canada. It isn't the way that we approach it in Saskatchewan. We approach it as a nation-building exercise, or a nation-building relationship, I think you'd say, and not just our nation. The 160 other countries that this 1.25 million people in this Canadian province do commerce with each and every year.
Thank you so much. Really, really fascinating to hear those insights from Canada and subnationally as well. Brooke, if governments are rethinking resilience at the national level or the subnational level as well, as we just heard, what responsibility would you say that global agriculture or agribusiness firms have in preventing new forms of dependency, and particularly around then seeds, around biotechnology, fertilizers, and digital agriculture? And how can innovation be scaled in a way that strengthens stability rather than amplifies fragility in vulnerable regions? Please.
Thank you for the question. And again, thank you all for being with us today. So I like that question because agriculture isn't like other industries, is it? It is not just about producing food. It's about national security. It's about the backbone of rural economies and of the global economy as a whole. And it's an industry that, even though it happens very locally, it is a complicated, geopolitically complex global industry. And so it is all of our collective responsibility to make sure that we have a resilient and sustainable food system. When I think about the question that you asked, to me, the answer to that is technology. And here's why. So we're going to have another 2 million people on the planet over the course of the next 25 years. And at the same time, food is getting more difficult to grow with the impacts of climate change, more severe weather. It's not going to get easier. Simply put, at the time where we need it most, food is just getting more and more challenging to produce. The only solution to that is a constant state of innovation and truly global cooperation in terms of our ability to get the best technology into the hands of farmers as quickly and safely as we possibly can, to give them the choices that they need to make the best decision for their lands. They know their land better than we're ever going to know it. It's our job to create resilience, to give those farmers choices, the tools, the training that they need to use that technology effectively. And to be honest, we're not doing a great job at it right now from a global perspective. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think that is. So if we just take India as an example, this is already an enormous player from an agriculture perspective in the world. 45% of the workforce in India is in agriculture, but it only contributes to 18% of India's GDP, which is really interesting. And part of the reason for that is 85% of agriculture in India is smallholder farmers. So farmers that are growing on 0.3 hectares or less. You think about the impact that getting a new technology, a new herbicide, a new insecticide, a new seed technology into the hand of that grower, a lot of whom are women, which we saw in the video, the opportunity to increase production in their farm, to increase their own economic stability for themselves, for their families, for their villages, and to impact India's ability to not only feed itself, but to play an important role in exporting food around the world. You know, one of the goals of India is to become one of the, fruit and vegetable breadbaskets of the world. There's potential to be a global exporter of sustainable aviation fuel feedstocks. So its technology has the ability to create more resilience, to create more sustainability. So I want to give you a couple examples because I live and breathe in this world of ag technology. I know not everybody in this room does, but a couple of examples. One is something called gene editing. So gene editing is a new genomic technique that enables us to design seeds that have different nutritional profiles, that have different amino acid or fat profiles for biofuel feedstocks, that have the ability to better withstand severe weather, heat, drought. And it's different than GMOs, which everyone gets nervous about, because it's a technique that just uses the material that exists in the plant's natural DNA and enables us to accelerate the pace of what natural breeding does on its own. So you think about the ability to take a technology like that, put it into the hands of a smallholder farmer, where all of a sudden, the impacts of severe flooding or severe drought conditions, they have a much more predictable technology that will help them to improve their yields and make sure that they're more sustainable going forward economically for their families. Crop protection, again, insecticides, herbicides, fungicides. Without advanced innovative crop protection technology constantly coming out, we're going to have a real problem. And climate change is a big part of that. So with climate change, we have bugs that are adapting faster, that are multiplying faster, that are migrating farther, and they're increasing the pace of resistance. Without advanced crop protection products, we would lose annually 78% of fruit production and 54% of vegetable production. We can't afford to do that. We have to be constantly innovating in order to make sure we stay ahead of the curve. And then we have things like biologicals now, which are rapidly escalating or rapidly accelerating in countries like India, where you can combine the benefits of traditional chemistry with beneficial bacteria, with microbials that help the plant do more in terms of, I think, the ability to withstand against some of these extreme climate conditions, but also in certain crops have proved to increase yields by upwards of 20 to 30%. We have to give farmers all of the tools and all of the choices to do what's best for their land. So if I'd say if there's a kind of a message I want to leave everybody with and a call to action in the room, we're not doing enough right now to get this technology into the hands of farmers fast enough, efficiently enough, cost effectively enough. And what do I mean by that? Again, global agricultural economy. In order to get technologies like gene editing, for example, which have existed for a really long time, into the hands of farmers, we have to have much better coordination around the world in terms of having policy frameworks that are science-backed, that are regulatory systems that are predictable and that are agile, so that we're not cutting corners from a safety perspective, but that we're not getting in our own way in terms of being able to get the technologies into hands of farmers as quickly as we possibly can. We have to have much better cooperation across governments, across universities, research institutions, and big companies and small companies. We all have to be working together. Companies like Corteva, we spend $4 million a day in research and development, and we are just scratching the surface on what we're able to deliver, which is why we invest in and partner closely with small startups, with research institutions, universities. It has to be a collaborative approach in order to deliver solutions faster. And the last thing, which people don't like to talk about, but it's important, is you have to have IP protection. You have to be able to reward the small entrepreneurs and the universities and the bigger companies who are making the investments, delivering these innovations. You have to have strong and enforceable IP protection, because big public companies, which you need because of the resources and the scale, can't afford to invest if you can't generate a return on investment. It's just, it's basic economics. So I think we have a lot of work that we need to do collectively together. There's enormous opportunity in terms of what we can do with getting better technology into the hands of farmers, but it's incumbent on all of us to do a better job working collectively together to deliver those solutions.
Thank you, Brooke. There was a lot in there, and in a short time that you had to deliver your answer. I particularly like that you brought up that we're not doing a great job, and there's a lot of challenges, but also there are solutions. And another point you mentioned is the smallholder farmers who are producing a lot of the food and who are also coincidentally amongst the most vulnerable to food insecurity. So David, over to you. How would you say that trade and economic modeling can better anticipate when food shocks risk escalating into political instability? And what policy reform matters the most for that?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So let me follow up on, yes, we are not doing a great job. Even if at the global level during decades, we have managed to reduce hunger and malnutrition. Since 2015, this has stopped at the global level. And today we have more people in chronic hunger or in acute hunger than 10 years ago. So globally, it's basically 300 million people that are near famine situation. That's 700 million people that are chronic hunger, meaning that every day they don't have enough calories even to operate properly. And we have more than 2 billion people that are food insecure and 2.6 billion people that cannot afford a healthy diet. So, on a planet of 8.5 billion, you see the magnitude of the challenge. Why we are in this situation? Because first, agricultural productivity has slowed down globally and was also distributed in an unfair way. So if you think at the world level in the last 30 years, we have increased productivity by 60%. In low-income countries, it was not even by 20%. So a lot of the food insecure country and food insecure people have just seen the world progressing, but not benefited from them. So we need this technology. We need to increase productivity in a sustainable way, but also in an inclusive way to make sure all these actors can have access to it. Otherwise, the market becomes more efficient, but you just see even sometimes price going down, and as a farmer, you can get worse off. But in the last 10 years, we have added crises. So climate change has accelerated and has contributed actually to deteriorate productivity in many places. We have seen conflict at the global or regional scale, like the war in Ukraine, at the local scale, like we see in Sudan. And I mean, you don't need to have a big experience to understand that farmers need peace, okay? You need to be able to access your input, you need to be able to grow. You don't want also people coming and looting or taking your cattle. So that's essential. But also we have seen economic crisis, exchange rate fluctuation. And that's very important because, you can produce the food, but if you cannot pay for it, how good it is. And I think it's very important, as a collective effort, that we should accept that no one should have to beg for food. No people, no country. And we are not there yet. And because we have these different crises combining their effects, that's where we start to show that the system today is still very resilient. I mean, despite everything we are putting on the systems, all the constraints that even some farmers are facing around the world, they are still delivering. Not as much as they can or they should, but we are still there. But we are adding a number of crises every year that is really pushing things to the limit. And that's what we need to analyze and to guide the proper responses. Because also we clearly said, food security is at the middle between national security, energy security, and water security. We need water and energy to produce crops, but also all crops can become energy today. And so we have this interaction. And when you have insecurity, food insecurity, you start to get political instability. And so even more conflict. When you start to have people competing for water, then you start to see political tension rising, especially in countries where you have different ethnic groups competing for the same resources. So really, making a system more efficient can also help getting a system less exposed to this shock. Now, the reality is, on one hand, we need to make the system more efficient to be also able to invest in making it more resilient. But facing these shocks, we have 4 types of action that are needed. First, before, making sure that our system is more resilient through, let's say, better seeds, better technology, better infrastructure. And it requires years of planning. You cannot improvise on this. Then, when you start to see the shock coming, you have a window of time, maybe 3 months, 4 months, where you can still do what we call anticipatory action. So what it means that a drought is coming. You will deliver some feed product in order that your rancher, your pastoralists can feed their cattle. Because like this, the cattle will survive the drought. If you don't do it, the cattle will die. So it's no more a loss of income, it's a loss of capital for them. And so you have these 3 months where if you have the information, you can still act, and the rate of return is for $1 spent, you save in average $7 of damage. Then the shock is coming, and here you need to absorb the shock. You need to get social safety net, for instance, but you need also to target it properly. You don't want to waste your taxpayer money. And not all the farmers are going to be impacted in the same way. Not all the households are going to be impacted in the same way. So you don't want just, for example, to stabilize the price of your country or distribute money to everyone. You want to target the vulnerable one. And then you will need to rebuild and rebuild better, but not for the last crisis, for the next one. You don't want to be safe-proof to the last flood or the last disease to the next one. And that's where, for example, at FAO, we work on different modeling and monitoring system. Last year, we were launching our situation room, where we monitor 13 big risks globally to see, to be able to not only unleash this anticipatory action and working with policymakers, but also working with insurance and reinsurance company to see what can be insured to get the cash. Because I've said, okay, we know what to do, but if you have don't the money in bank, you are stuck. But also more forward-looking modeling efforts that support other initiatives like the AMIS, the Agricultural Market Information System, where we really look at these different crises and how they are being to be combined. Because just, to give you a couple of examples, 3 years ago, due to climate change, we had seen less water in the lake that are feeding the Panama Canal. So you get the boats normally going from the Gulf of Mexico that should bring soybean, wheat, corn to Asia stuck. So what people have said, okay, we are going to take the Suez Canal. And when they arrived there, due to the terrorist attack in the Red Sea, they were stuck. And so they had to go through to Africa and the Cape of Good Hope. And this is where things start to put pressure on the system, And at the same time, you have a geopolitical crisis, stock markets are going wild, exchange rate is fluctuating, and it's through the modeling that we can see this combined effect to lead to the last point you were pointing, coordination, and making sure that private actors, public actors can take the right decision. Because one of the big challenges we face, when you see crisis, you see panic. When you see panic, people make mistakes. So COVID-19, people were saying, oh, we have a problem. We need to keep food at home. We are going to put export restriction. But the problem was not getting food at home. The question was about moving food. So instead of doing trade restriction, the goal was to do trade facilitation. And several months were lost on that, okay? And I can take other example, but the time is short. But so this coordination is key. And for FAO, that's also how we contribute to the de-risking through information, de-risking with the right type of data, in order that we can manage crises when they are, but also that we can build a more long-term development for sustainable and resilient system. And that's what a couple of years we introduced a global initiative that is called the Global FAO Roadmap to Achieve Food Security and Nutrition in the context of climate action. But all of these elements have to be tackled. And that's it.
Thank you, David. I think you really went straight to the heart of how this polycrisis is unfolding, right? When we have this big crisis being conflict, climate, and economy, really reinforcing each other and what it means for food security and the risk of further instability. Also for very concrete action on how we can at least strengthen resilience to these crises. But still, it seems that it's hard to act since we are continue to not really doing a good job. So Mudit, from where you're standing, what early warning data or indicators do you feel are the most critical to detect when food price or supply shocks are approaching this tipping point for unrest? Please, over to you.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to express my views. I would like to start by saying that civilization exists by the consent of geological events. It's happened before, it'll happen in the future. And coming to your question of what is the data we need, the data we need is free media and more democracy. And that's the only relevant institutions to provide in real time the information that the government needs when prices are going up and food security is an issue. And I would like to draw your attention from some of the historical events in the context of India, which are extremely relevant from food security and climate change. I want to go back to World War II. There was a great famine that took place in India during World War II, which was related to food, called the Great Bengal Famine, which killed around 3 to 6 million people. And it's interesting, the shortage of food was due to, there was a cyclone, there was a cross-crop disease which happened simultaneously, as a result of which there was a shortage. But there was a war going on which prevented basically from declaring that Bengal had a famine. Rice was diverted for the war effort. It was diverted away from common people. That is the unfortunate consequence of war. Priorities are set up. There was no shortage of rice as such, but it was just being exported for war effort. And Winston Churchill, whose name has become very popular recently, basically prevented, because of the censorship of the media, he prevented it to be declared as a famine. Even the local British government wanted it to be declared as a famine so that the relief effort could start, but it was not declared. And as a result of which 3 to 6 million people lost their lives. I think that is the sacrifice that was made to continue with the war effort during World War II. That's the price India has paid. I would imagine not that many soldiers were lost by the British, but these are the people who paid the price due to food security. And that was primarily, it happened because of lack of information and the information being censored due to the war effort. India, when we got our independence, we were by and large a very poor country. Food security was a serious concern for India. But we avoided large-scale famine simply because we had democracy and we had free media. Whenever there was a shortage of food, prices were going up, media would report on it, and government would act. And because it's a democracy, the government is compelled to act based on the demands of people. So democracy is a very important institution for this effort. Now, coming to the point of data, data is not the only issue. What you do with the data and the information it generates is also important. And for that, I would like to draw the attention from another historical event. This is the Great Leap Forward, because these are two events that have killed, based on food, millions of people. The Great Leap Forward, which happened in China, in the late 1960s, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe late 50s, I'm getting the timing wrong, killed 40 to 45 million people in the matter of 2 to 3 years. Now, here was a clear misuse of data that sort of created this problem at a big scale. Now, the problem was that it was reported to the government, the Chinese government, that 20% of wheat or crop loss happens because of sparrows and because of birds feeding and eating this crop. Now, what did the government do with this data? Now, that was a fact. There's no denying that. There was data. The government then decided to incentivize the local people and the government machinery to kill sparrows. But when they got rid of the sparrows, the unfortunate part was that you had the locust infestation, which went on to create one of the biggest man-made disaster in modern history in the last 60 years. Now, why am I going back to history? It's simply because the global order is getting upended right now. We are in the middle of major, major insecurity. Now, in India, I think for some strange reason, I must give credit to the present government that they thought about self-reliance back before the global order was probably becoming, before even COVID, when the global order was revealing itself. We went in for self-reliance. India is a very large country. Geographically, we have a huge domestic market. We can move resources. But to be very honest, I think for the small countries in the new global order, in the new geopolitical order, I think these are very difficult times. Because no matter how hard they try, they are living in a very uncertain environment because they have to depend on the global supply chain for many of their needs, whether it is food, medicine, basic necessities. And we saw that during COVID when it got disrupted. The small countries in our own neighborhood there were major political conflicts. We thought they were politically very stable, but it resulted in major, major political crisis in those countries. Now, in India, we have our own unique challenge, which is related to food, not necessarily food security per se. Now, in the last decade, the government of India, the Prime Minister's, one of his favorite projects has been the Prime Minister Ujjwala Yojana, which basically means that he wants to switch India away from using firewood and cow dung as a cooking medium, but towards LPG. And let me tell you, the infrastructure that India set up for that, the digital public infrastructure and the major improvements that we have done in our energy infrastructure, actually this scheme is a remarkable success. From 120 million people in rural area relying on LPG in 2011-12, that number has gone up to 500 million people, almost 3 to 4 times an expansion. But now in this global disruption, with LPG, we don't have those LPG, we need to import it from the other countries, particularly from the crisis region right now. You can clearly see that India is faced with a geopolitical situation where India would have to, at some point in time, take a stance and, sort of reveal its, reveal is the wrong word to say, but at some point in time, we have to take a stance because it is affecting our people. And what democracy does essentially is that foreign policy, national policy is centered in a democracy where you have to put your citizens' interests first because politicians have to get themselves reelected. So in my opinion, I think there are historical lessons we have to draw upon. For India, fortunately, we are a large country. We will probably weather the crisis and we might actually come out stronger. But our food security is at the moment linked to our energy security. I'm not so much worried about wheat production, rice production, but I'm very worried about energy security. And I think we have taken adequate measures to resolve this. But coming back, just to circle back to data, I think free media, democratic institutions are perhaps the only means by which we can inform the government to take the right action. So I would end with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mudit. Really, really pertinent to look back at the history and what we can learn, and also what I think all of you, the whole panel, has really pointed to the importance of looking at the whole system, right? It's about climate, it's about energy, it's about production, and they all affect each other for worse and for good, right? If we can break that destructive cycle and actually make them reinforce each other positively, then we have a good way forward. I want to open up now also for the audience here to pose any questions you have. I see many hands already and we have not too much time. So if I may please ask you to briefly just state who you are and try to keep your questions as short as possible so we can get as many in. Over to you.
My name is Brajesh Singh. You work for the University of Western Australia. We are another hat as a chairman of the FAO's ITPS. And so the very brief questions for you, Brooke, and one for Mohit. That you talk about technology, nobody can question about it. That's important. Do you think that though traditionally the input industry, agrochemicals industry, ignore the sustainability side of the inputs? Why I'm saying, I'll just give you an example. Human medicines, more than 50 to 60% of human medicines have the origin of natural products.
Yeah.
In agriculture, we have less than 10%.
Yeah.
For Mohit, very quick questions for you, is not that a failure of governance if we have to wait for the press to tell that the famine is coming? Famine should have an indicator, shouldn't it? So you have a supply chain inputs, for example. If you're going to have a hindrance in inputs, you will have a famine for some point of time. Examples is the climate variability denial. We can predict what's going to happen next season and season after. So I'm just asking, I know it's a provocative question, but it's deliberately provocative. That will not be the failure of governance. You have to wait for the press to tell us. Thank you.
Should we take one more question and then for the panel to answer?
Hi all, this is Amardeep Singh Ahluwalia. I'm a founder, managing director of Ivara Strategic Advisor company in India. We help international companies to work in India and especially the states. The states are the most challenging in India. This is to the Premier Scott Moe. Premier, I would say, can you tell us about the new India-Canada Pulse Protein Center of the Excellence that was announced on 2nd March, very recently? How this center will help insulate Indian nutritional security, objectives for vulnerable populations, and the outsized role of Saskatchewan will play in this center.
Do you want me to start? So it's a great question, and it's something I actually get excited about because at Corteva in particular, our entire pipeline from the $1.4 billion that we spend every year across seed and crop protection technology, all of it is tied to increasing sustainability. And you can think about sustainability in a couple different ways. You can talk about sustainability of the products, which I think is your question, which we'll definitely talk about, but just technology as a whole, the evolution of that over the last 50 or so years has prevented 500 million hectares from coming into agricultural production. That is the sustainability benefit of technology in agriculture. But talking about crop protection, for example, you're right, no one should be waiting for instructions. Everyone knows the challenges that we face. And that's why every new pipeline in discovery for crop protection for us right now are starting with naturally derived products. It's the reason why we spent $1.5 billion a couple years ago buying 2 biological companies, because we know that that's going to be a core part of the future of the industry. Now you need both. You need traditional chemistry. I mentioned earlier, again, we're going to have a lot of resistance issues and increasing pest pressures over time. So you need a combination, integrated pest management tools. But the new innovations that we have coming out of our pipeline, both biologicals and chemistry, it's reducing use rates. It's making things safer. We're the only company, I think, in the world in the ag chem side that has what's called a predictive safety center, where as we take every step in the R&D pipeline, we're measuring the economic feasibility for farmers, we're measuring the efficacy, we're measuring safety to farmers. You think about smallholder farmers who are applying crop protection products with backpacks. Safety could not be more important. But it's also use rates. So we have a product called Rinscore now that's an herbicide that we use in rice and a lot of other crops across Asia, where the amount of the active ingredient that you need now to serve a hectare of production is the size of a sugar packet. So you think about that in comparison to just the volume of old chemistry. That's why the innovation piece is so important. It needs to be more naturally derived products. It needs to be lower use rates. It needs to be a combination of traditional chemistry, natural products, and biologicals. We have to do all of the things. And then seed technology is a big part of that too, where things like gene editing, we have the potential with this tool to be able to put fungicide protection into the seed for the first time. We've never been able to do that in biotechnology. So again, it's innovation, innovation, innovation on all fronts for safety, for economics, but certainly for, I would say, environmental and economic sustainability as well.
Yeah, I think prediction and free press are not substitutes. David out here talked about modeling. He's talked about crisis where large population is affected by a crisis. His models are predicting it, but it's a lived reality for people. Why are we not aware of it? Because it's happening in the part of the region which is not of concern to majority of us. Because it's not a part of the democratic architecture. But in India, if in a remote place prices are going up and there's a scarcity, there will be a local media that will be reporting it. I do a lot of predictions and modeling. How do I communicate that with the government that, look, I am predicting a major food crisis? The government has many, many other advisors who can contradict my models itself. There's not one single model that we talk about. So I think the relevance of free press is because they are sensing local problems that are emerging. You see, the beauty of free press, and I think, is the wisdom of the crowd. We have to rely on independent free media as the wisdom of the crowd to inform the government. It's not that the government doesn't want to act, but democratic governments are sensitive to the needs of the people. Unfortunately, in large part of the world where David is doing modeling, democracy is also in short supply. So even when they are informing the global organizations, who's going to take the action? So my context of media is not that in this world, why do we need media? It's to inform the democratic governments to act. Models can get sophisticated. Like I told you, data exists. Interpretation of data becomes extremely important. Getting the localized problems becomes extremely. So it's in that context I was saying that we need free media and democratic institutions are our best bet for the governments to act.
With respect to the Pulse Center, I was just going to say, everyone, being part of a government for 18 or 19 years, don't ever hesitate taking the opportunity to inform the government of what is going on. Just to back up on the Pulse Center of Excellence, we were up earlier this week. A number of folks from Canada. I said we have the former Prime Minister with us today. Our current Prime Minister was in town on Monday at a meeting with Prime Minister Modi. There was a number of agreements in the energy security and food security space with uranium supply, which also comes from our province, for nuclear power here in India, a 9-year uranium supply deal. And what you had mentioned, which I think is a great opportunity actually to take the strengths from one country and a second country and actually overlay those strengths for the better good, the greater good of all involved. And it's the India-Canada Pulse Protein Center of Excellence. In Saskatchewan, we have pulses. We sell pulses to India virtually year in, year out. In India, they also produce pulses as well, and we've worked closely with Indian farmers cooperative groups on sharing some of the agronomics that we have discovered in Saskatchewan. The next step is we have some protein fractionation, pulse fractionation technology in Saskatchewan that I think has an opportunity to marry up with some of the technology that we have that India has, and come to an agreement on providing nutrition. And this is a program that is largely going to deliver on some of the intentional commitments of Prime Minister Modi with respect to providing nutrition to students, to pregnant women, and lactating mothers, and essentially youth and a maternal nutritional health program. And I think this is going to have the opportunity to provide nutrition for literally hundreds of millions of people in the not too distant future in the country of India, using some technology, some of the raw product, the pulses from a place like Saskatchewan, so very far away, but then utilizing the ability that India has to scale up that technology and scale it up quickly, because in Saskatchewan, as we said, we have 1.25 million people. We don't think in the terms of 1.4 billion people, but they do every day in India. And so utilizing the strengths of both nations, I think, is going to have some tremendously good nutritional outcomes, to your point, to part of that 2.5 billion people that need those nutritional outcomes. And so that was one of the agreements that was committed to earlier this week, along with a number of other organizations. I think it was NIFTM, the University of Saskatchewan in Canada, that is going to have a positive outcome.
Thanks. Thank you so much. We're coming towards the end of the panel, but I think we are able to end on a short commentary from our last panelist who just landed at the airport and has sent through a... No, we don't have. Oh. Well, we thought she might be able to send something, but in that case, we're about to finish, and I would like to say a big thank you to the panelists here for a really engaging and thoughtful discussion. I think we managed to pack in a lot of topics in a short time. Definitely more to be discussed and more to keep working on. Thank you as well to the audience for being with us, for your questions, for engaging with us, and to the organizers. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the dialogues.